How much juice does Stefon Diggs have left in the tank for the Buffalo Bills? We'll hit on that and plenty more today coming up on Talking Buffalo.
Welcome to Talking Buffalo, featuring conversations with guests from around the world of sports, media, pop culture, and all things Buffalo, with your host, Patrick Moran.
All right, what is going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Talking Buffalo, your weekday daily driver for Buffalo Sports Talk and more. My name is Patrick Moran. Thank you very much, as always, for locking in, whether you're watching, listening, following, subscribing. I appreciate y'all very much. I am joined right now for a second consecutive Monday. My man Joe from Queens at Buffalo Wins on Twitter. Last week was kind of like a little bit of shock value to a lot of people. This week, this is like kind of becoming a thing now, man. What's going on? How you doing?
We'll see what happens if it's really a thing. We'll see. I don't know yet. I still a lot of trepidation, to be honest with you, but we'll see.
It's good to have you on, man. Again, thank you everybody for locking in as well. We're going to talk about Stefon Diggs today, the good, the bad, the ugly of him, his production, how it's really fell off at the end of last season. Is that kind of an anomaly? Is that a scheme thing? Is that the player's age and just the talent and the wear and tear? We'll kind of dive into that here just a few minutes. Couple quick hits here at the top before we get into the meat and potatoes of today's episode. I want to shout out, just talked to you earlier today. You didn't know about it at the time, but Jonah Broadstein, a local media guy, pretty good guy too, man. I was listening to Tim Graham's show over the course of the weekend, and I didn't know either, but come to learn that Jonah suffered a heart attack a couple of weeks ago. He had chest pain and went to urgent care or whatever and got transferred to a hospital. And he had a heart attack, got a stent put in, but knock on wood, all's well with him so far, doing good. But yeah, man, thoughts definitely with Jonah. You brought this up to me when we were talking earlier. Young too, man. That's young to be having heart issues.
I think he's around our age, or at least mine. It's just I couldn't believe it. I was like, geez, it puts things in perspective, especially when you're a dad or a new dad like me. And you're just like, man, I'm 44, and it's just I have to get my health in order. You know what I mean? And I'm sure you feel the same way, in terms of that.
Sure. Yeah, that's definitely a wake-up call. Like I said, and too, on the podcast, what I really liked about it, and I listen to Tim's show regularly when I can. I didn't know about it, but what I really appreciated about that episode, and I would advise everybody out there to go tune in. If for no other reason, Jonah was pretty open and honest about everything that happened, and just talking about lifestyle changes that need to be made and stuff like that. I thought it was a really good, candid, open conversation that he had with Tim. Anyway, shout out to him.
Yeah, also, I just got the those push-up things for Valentine's Day, which I asked for my wife to get me. Like those personal push-ups. It's like the things you go down and you twist.
Oh,
I'm like, this is how I can try to get in shape or get better. Because, man, the days of being young, and I used to get wasted and then get up with a hangover and go, I'm going to the gym, I'll be fine. Like, I could never do any of that. If I got a hangover, I'd be out for 2 days. so kids, enjoy your youth is what I'm saying.
Sure. And it's funny too, we get older here. It's lifestyle, not much has changed. Like, my eating habits have never really changed. I've always been a pretty shitty eater. The difference is when I was in my 20s or even early 30s, my wife, I was in the bar business, so I would be getting home at 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, and she'd be making me rigatoni, full ass heavy meals at 2, 3 in the morning. Never gained any weight because I had a really high metabolism. As I gotten older, that metabolism's gotten so much lower. Now, if I even look at something the wrong way, I put on a quick 2, 3 pounds. But yeah, man, you bring up a real good point. Just it's never too early or too young, I should say, to still take care of your health.
You want to talk about like eating at like a restaurant? So I've said this before. I used to own a pizzeria, or my parents did, and as a 13-year-old, I was like a little chubby. And then when I got to start working at my parents' shop, I worked there like twice a week, basically on the weekends. And I went there and I was just angry eating, and I used to eat at the age of 14, I'd get in there, I'd have a slice of pizza, then I have a julienne salad, which was like ham, turkey, provolone, lettuce, tomatoes, everything, ranch dressing, and then like an hour and a half later, I would have a full like sub and like a
Yeah.
hamburger or something, something greasy and disgusting, and I ballooned up when I was in high school at that point, and I blame the pizza place for that. And then when I lost weight, it was like in college, and I just started like, okay, like chicken salad, maybe a slice, just take it easy and not go a 4-course meal like I was going to La Berdem or some crap like that. I was so hungry, but that was just
Well, like I said, Jonah had a heart attack. Fortunately, he's still around. He lived to tell about it. Couple sad items before we dive into Stefon here. I could hear like so on the video side. Maybe you could see this real quick because I got some brand new gear while we're doing this show. I know you said that you were having an echo. I could tell you that there's nothing wrong on the audio side. Like everything's coming through perfect on the mixer. So whatever you got going on over there, hopefully you can, as long as you can deal with it. Everything is perfect here on this side. Now you're muted though, so now I can't hear you.
I figured it out. I had this on. Okay, I figured it out. I had my headset on, and that's why I was acting weird. So I think it's fine now. So
all right, so anyway. We're good, man. I wanted to also bring up last week one of the all-time great and colorful, controversial sports media figures in Buffalo passed away too. The coach, Chuck Dickerson, longtime football coach, of course, with the Buffalo Bills as well, but also a longtime WGR radio host. And like I said, one of the most candid, colorful, and crazy people that I've ever heard on the air. And I know you kind of have a little bit of a connection to him, don't you?
A little bit. I mean, I wouldn't say a giant connection. I just was an intern at GR back in 2002, and I was the afternoon intern, and I basically was there from, I would say, like 2 to 6. And I only met him once because at that point, this was like 2002, like I said, he was doing his show. And I don't think a lot of people knew this. He was doing his show during the winter from Florida, which is crazy because back then, like, think about this, 22 years ago, there was no such thing as really like internet radio. But they built a studio for him, I guess. And I was like, I went there, I was like, where's his studio? And he's like, oh, he's in Florida. And I was like, okay, cool. And, I didn't really, it was like once or twice a week I would come in, and then I met him once, and he was a really nice guy, big dude. And he had dogs with him when I met him, which was kind of like, oh, wow, you can bring your dog to work day. I guess if you're Chuck Dickerson, you can do that. He also, it was, that whole time period of like talk radio, like in the 90s, like that's really what cemented me as a big, like not a sports fan, but someone who like did want to dabble into like sports media at certain times in my life, because I was a big radio guy as a kid. I didn't really read the newspaper all that much. My family was from Italy. They didn't read the paper. That was my line of like TV and radio. And like during that heyday of GR, and they had NSA, and before that BEN, and people may not know this, but BEN and WGR were owned by two different companies at the time, and they both did sports and talk on both stations. And Dickerson was on GR from like 3 to 7, I believe it was, or 3 to 6. I don't remember, to be honest with you. And like BEN, I forgot who they had before that, but then they had a merger, and they bought their the competition basically, and then NSA came out of there. But that dude was a psycho, if you want me to be. He was just, I don't know. I think of the scene in Private Parts, Howard Stern's movie, where like they're talking to like, where Pig Vomit wants to get Howard Stern fired basically. And he's talking to like the audience person, and the audience person is like something along the lines of like 60% of the people who hates Howard Stern are still listening to them because they want to see what he says. And I totally believe there are people who were hate listening to Chuck Dickerson, because there were times he was just like, he was an a-hole, like, and he was like, this guy hates the Bills, but he's funny and kind of entertaining. And at times he was a little
beef. He had a beef with Marv, man. I mean, that was a legit beef. Like they didn't like each other.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's the thing. Like, it's funny when they had their tiffs, because he coached the Bills from, I want to say Marv brought him in, and he was there until the Washington Super Bowl. And that was the one thing. It was the funny thing about the Washington Super Bowl. And if you watched Four Falls for Buffer, they talked about it, how he said, like, you know, he made fun of the Washington defensive line, which I didn't even think it was a big deal. Like, he just made fun of it, and it wasn't. And at that time, I don't even remember it that big of a deal. I remember that Super Bowl week, the biggest deal was Thurman Thomas ghosted the media and was pissed off because Ted Marchibroda had said that Jim Kelly was the team MVP. And at that time, I don't know what Thurman was. I think he was trying to look for something to be pissed off about to motivate him. And he was pissed off and he blew off the media. And if you ever looked up the archives of like Peter King's articles from that Super Bowl afterwards, he laid in the Thurman. Like, this dude he's not mature enough, blah, 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 because he blew them off. And then, like, you know, Four Falls made it a big deal. Like, they kind of acted like the big reason they lost that Super Bowl was Washington was really pumped up. And I was kind of like, it's a Super Bowl. Like, I don't care what's happening in your life. You're going to be pumped up. You don't need Chuck Dickerson to kind of get you through. But anyways, he got canned from there. You know, they said because of that. And he laid into Marv. He laid into everyone. And I one of the funniest things I remember I used to work at my parents' pizzeria. This is like in the summertime, or even like when I became like 18, 19 years old. We put it on the radio, and we kind of went between like NSA and Coach. I think if I wanted to feel pissed off, like I was pissed off at the Bills, I'd be like, oh, we gotta listen to him because he's speaking my language because he's angry. And if it was positive, I kind of like would go, because there were times where I thought he was being a little bit too contrived with his take.
Sure.
But he used to hate, like, you want to talk about media crime. Like, I remember he used to do a yearly show. It was called like the Media Ass Kissers Award or something like that. And basically he would take calls from people, and they would just be on, and they're like, I hate Ed Kilgore because of this, that, or the other thing. And he'd be egging him on. And he hated everyone. Like, I remember he used to call Mike Shope. He used to call Mike Shope when he was on NSA. He called him Schmuck Shope. He goes, oh yeah, that Schmuck Shope, he's vanilla, and screw him. And then he called Howard Simon No Ball Simon. And like, I would be dying laughing at how like how this is. And I'm thinking to myself today, like, there is no way anyone would, like, you. And his beefs were with like those guys were like 100 times worse than like what you see like
today.
Today. And maybe more of it was contrived. Like, he seemed like he was definitely more in that line of an entertainer. Whereas today, I feel like a lot of people on GR, like, their personalities are more like hosts. They're not like as contrived as he was. It felt to me a little bit, but he was an X's and O's guy, which is kind of ahead of its time. Like, at that point, like, he would talk about like the film, and that was one thing like I felt he was a bit of a dick about, because he kind of was like, I know the game because I've been a coach, which, you know, and like he'd cut people off and on the phone and all that sort of thing. And he also like hated Flutie a lot. Like, you could do a social experiment during that era about how the media kind of like dictates how you feel. Because I really firmly believe that the way that Buffalo turned on Doug Flutie a little bit during that time was because of WGR, because that whole station could not stand him from day one, hated him. And it did not matter if he had a good game or not. He would come on the radio and bury Flutie and like go after him. And he may have been right at the end, because at the end of Flutie's time there, people I think thought he was a bit of an egomaniac, etc. But they kind of egged that thing on, and like, it was hilarious to me because when Flutie got cut and left, he like turned on Rob Johnson in like 2 seconds and like hated Rob Johnson right away. After he built up Rob Johnson as like the second coming, he was like, "Oh, screw this guy." I remember because I was listening to him, and he was like, "I don't like him," because he was upset because he did an interview in Sports Illustrated in a hot tub, and kind of this old boomer take of like, "Oh, he's in a hot tub, the hell with him," and you know, he was done with him. But there were a lot of people who did not. He was a lightning rod. Like, he was a character. I don't know how you felt, like how much you listened to him, but I listened to him a lot. Like I went back and forth, like I said, between NSA and GR, like from that 3 to 7 slot.
You would tune in to hear whether you liked him or whether you hated him. You would tune in to see what he would say next. He was kind of a hot take machine before being a hot take machine was fashionable. And I remember too, you know, sometimes when you have, you know, a little kid, and if you're an asshole of a kid, you would pick on a kid only because you know you're going to get a reaction. You say the wrong thing, he's going to start crying. You make fun of, you get him going on purpose. You wind him up on purpose. I'll never forget one of my favorite coach memories or just WGR memories. I don't remember how old we were. You're talking like right after the Washington Super Bowl, so early 90s. I actually wasn't a kid. I was a young adult by this point. I guess part of the stoner age. But me and my buddy Scully would call the radio
Scully.
station on purpose. That's my guy, man. And Scully would intentionally say something. He didn't even believe it. His sole intention was to rile the coach up. Like I remember specifically, it might have been before the third or the fourth Super Bowl, but it was trade Andre Reed while the guy had any value because his value is only going to plummet. You got to trade him. And just a couple other really intentionally dumb sports takes, which I'm sure today the guys on the radio, the guys and the girls, not just in Buffalo, but all the radio stations, they get people like us who used to do that, just have really dumb, stupid takes on purpose to try to get a rise out of them. But anyway, you would wind the coach up and say the wrong thing, and he would just start screaming on the air and having one of his rants. That would be our goal, to say something dumb enough to get him to have one of his classic rants on the air.
Yeah, I remember one time I went. So probably the most famous game I ever went to as a Bills fan was I went to Jim Kelly's last game. It was the Jaguars game in the playoffs. They lost. Heading into that game, I don't think anyone thought the Bills were losing. I think Jacksonville just made the playoffs, second-year team.
Yep.
You didn't really know them that well because they were just like a bunch of young guys, and the Bills lost. It was shocking. And I remember leaving the parking lot. It was me, my sister, and my dad. My sister was a Bills fan, but she didn't listen to radio all that much. And we put it on GR, and he was furious. He was giving them hell. And I just remember this girl called into the show, and she gave one of these poetic, the Bills might be down, but we still love them, and they're great, and we got to stick behind them. And then Dickerson goes, you know what? Enough for that shit. Not shit, but he said, enough for that crap. Why don't you go to the back of a room with a rose and read some poetry? We just got our asses kicked, and they're terrible, and blah, blah, blah. And I remember my sister looked at me and goes, who the hell's this guy right now yelling at this girl for? And I was like, yeah, he's pretty intense, I guess. But yeah, he was intense. And I'm surprised, he was done, I think, in 03 was when, I had moved in 02 and that's when Show came to GR, and they both had their own show for not even a year. I think if memory serves me, they had a year, and then Dickerson was on sporadically, I think after football games, on Monday mornings for maybe a year or two. But he kind of fell off the face of the earth a little bit. He never did other media. He never got on the podcast circuit or any of that. I remember Tim Grant had a story about him a couple years ago, a random story. And the thing I remember from that Graham piece was that the reason why they let him go, they fired him, they reworked the whole GR crew, was because this GR was getting into business with the Sabres. And the rumor was that the Sabres did not want him at all to be a part of that whole spiel, and that was in Graham's article. I remember a couple years ago, because he used to, that was the thing. Dickerson knew football. I'll give him credit. He was a blowhard. He knew football. He did not know hockey at all. And I think people knew that and read, and he tried to act like it a little bit. And I think he was, if I remember, his hockey takes were always just he hated Hasek. That was what I remember. He hated Hasek. He was oh, he's weak-minded. And, he would always say he's insult him. That's what I kind of remember him about his hockey stuff. And, but yeah, he never came out. We never really heard about him afterwards. He was, I mean, he was an old man. I mean, I forgot what age
he's 81. He's 81 now.
81.
He was 81 now.
He was 81. So yeah, he was at in his late 60s. You never really heard about him, I guess, in terms of no one really gave him another shot. At least Howard Simon, he's still doing stuff for Channel 7.
Right.
He drops in, does a podcast here and there, but Chuck was done. You never heard from him again. But
one of my many regrets when it comes specifically to this podcast, was at least not attempting to reach out over the last 5 years or so. Even if he said no or whatever, or ignored my request, I kind of regret not reaching out to try to get him to be on the show and have an interview with him. That would have probably been some good stuff. But anyway, rest in peace, Coach. Also, some sad news on Sunday. Chris Mortensen from ESPN died. One of the all-time great NFL insiders. I loved watching him on TV. That really sucks. But all right, let's dive into some Stefon Diggs talk here. Before we talk about the potential that he has fallen off a cliff, let's just talk for a few minutes about how great he's been since he's got into Buffalo. You trade a first round pick, I believe a first and a fourth for him, and it's went down as one of the all time great trades. And I know there's a lot of people out there who are like, well, they could have gotten Justin Jefferson. You don't know that the Bills are going to draft Justin Jefferson if they didn't make that trade for Diggs. They could have taken Jalen Reagor. Jalen Reagor went one pick in the draft before Justin. So that's hearsay, and we'll never know that. But anyway, Stefon Diggs, 4 years in Buffalo, 66 games, 445 receptions, 5,272 yards, 37 touchdowns. He's already fourth all time in franchise history in receptions and receiving yards. So he's already up there amongst the all-time greats. He's a two-time All-Pro pro player. I get that right. All-Pro player, 2020, 2022. He's averaged 81 yards receiving a game for the Bills throughout his career. Then that includes the slide at the end of the season factored in as well. His 127. I could go on for days, bro, with these numbers. 127, 108, 107, 104. His receptions are the top 4 single season in franchise history. And he has the first, second, 11th, and 12th most receiving yard seasons in franchise history. Before we dive into any potential negative stuff with Stefon, just talk about the addition that he's been to the Buffalo Bills over the first 4 years, the trade, and just the value that he's brought in to Josh Allen in this organization.
Before Diggs came to Buffalo, Josh Allen was an ordinary quarterback. You cannot deny that. Okay, 2018, Josh was a rookie. He was all over the place.
Sure.
He had like 1 or 2 good games, but he was raw, like rawer than meat in terms of what he did. 2019, the Bills made the playoffs. Allen was better, but he wasn't like 300-yard game Allen yet. He was just a guy I felt that
highlights.
He got touchdowns, but I remember that year the Bills had like maybe like 6 or 7 games. They maybe had like 2 offensive touchdowns or fewer, something like that, maybe half. It was not, and that was when you couldn't go on Twitter and not get into an argument with someone about Allen because you had the Allen stands, and then you had people who were like, he's okay, but like he had his crew. Then they make the trade for Diggs, and everything just clicked, and he went to another level, Josh Allen. And I think you cannot sit here and go without Stefon Diggs, Josh Allen will be the same guy. Like I don't think he would be. Okay, I think that's the importance of having a number 1 wide receiver. And you look across the NFL and you see like within the last 2-3 years, like wide receivers getting dealt, like Adams from Green Bay to the Raiders. What happened to Aaron Rodgers? His numbers went down in Green Bay that final year. Go to Jaylen Brown, leaves the Titans. Tannehill at that point was modest, good. He leaves there. What happens to Tannehill? He goes downhill. Like there are like you can go through history and talk about wide receivers leaving and where their numbers are. Aside from Brady, like who like you can put anyone in that offense for the most part. It's there, and I think Diggs, his impact on the Bills, he's a good teammate. I know there's a lot of conjecture. We'll get into that about whether he is or not, but it feels like he's a good teammate and he cares and he's there and he works hard and his numbers have been outstanding. And I debate this. Like if you put the top 3 wide receivers in Bills history, it's easy to come up with that top 3. It's Moulds, Reed, Diggs. Where you put those top 3, I don't even know, to be honest with you, because that's a tough, like, you got longevity on one part with Andre Reed. You got Eric Moulds he had 25 different quarterbacks, it felt like, throwing him the ball, but he had some great years. Then you have Diggs, who you just roll off the stats about how he's all-time single season guy, like in that, like everything. And that's a tough 3. That's a tough way to figure out who was the best of those and ranking those 3. But yeah, he's been important, and he's done it a lot with not the best supporting cast at wide receiver, out there. Like in terms of he doesn't have like I don't think he's ever had really a Robin here. It was supposed to be Gabe Davis. It's supposed to be John Brown.
Cole Beasley for a while.
I'll give him 1 season. He had Cole Beasley at his best, sure, but then he got hurt. That last year he was here and it's kind of mediocre, but he doesn't. I don't think he's had like, it's not like a Waddle Hill situation in Miami where you have 2 like studs there, So yeah, he's been very important, and I think it's a reason why it's hard for anyone.
He's taken for granted? Do you think Stefon Diggs has been so good in Buffalo for the last 4 years that fans, to some extent, maybe the media too, to an extent at least, almost take the greatness that he's given this team for granted. You know, we could talk about Andre Reed, and you are right, by the way. The top 3 receivers, what order you want to have, I guess it depends on what kind of mood you're feeling that day. But this guy, all 4 of his seasons have been as good or better than anything Andre Reed ever did in his career. Now, I know football is different today than it was back then as well. But I don't know. The bar's just so high with this guy. And again, we're going to talk about some of the issues with him in just a few here. But I almost feel like it's taken for granted. The fans almost, and probably me as well, we all take him for granted to some extent, just how good he's been for this team.
I don't think fans have taken him for granted. I mean, look, I'm not going to pretend I'm combing the desert in Buffalo asking people for that. I think the media has taken him for granted a little bit. And I think a part of that is, and I've talked about this before, he does not have a great relationship with the local guys in Buffalo. He doesn't. He's ghosted them a few different times. I think part of like how this all kind of bubbled up to the surface was because of that, because people were like, what's up with Diggs making his, his stupid shrug thing in the playoff game, like this giant spectacle, which it really wasn't. I mean, it was like the dude just shrugged his hands up in the air and on the sidelines. Like I've seen way worse than that. We saw Chris Kelsey almost kill his coach in the Super Bowl. Okay, like if that's Stefon Diggs, I don't give a shit what anyone says. If that's Stefon Diggs doing that in the Super Bowl, he would have got eviscerated, win, lose, or draw, because there would have been that baggage of, he no-showed the media a couple different times, and he's unpopular within. I do believe he is a little bit unpopular within the organization and certain junkets, but I think it's definitely more on the media side of that. I don't think the fans. I think the fans really do like him. From what I've seen on Bills X, we'll call it. He's done a lot, and like Bills fans are, incredibly loyal to players who are star players, and he's a star player. You can't deny that he is a star, and people know who he is. He's a Pro Bowl caliber guy. He is a Pro Bowler. I mean, if a Pro Bowl meant anything these days, but I don't think they've taken him for granted. I think certain parts of the media have taken him for granted. I think when you look at what he probably does, and look, I'm not combing the film. I'm not a film bro. You are actually now, so maybe you could talk about that if you wanted to. But like, Football 101 tells me when you have a guy like him and you got defenses taking him away, it opens it up for guys like Dalton Kincaid or Shakir, or Gabe Davis' crowning achievement was a freaking playoff game, which I want to believe the Chiefs were like, we're taking Diggs away from you, and we're going to let Gabe Davis kill us. And Gabe Davis did kill them. So that's what you get when you get a Diggs guy. Even though he's not getting the ball, I like to think he's helping the other team out, the other players out on that field. Because if Diggs gets hurt and you're rolling out there with, like last year with Shakir and Gabe Davis and Kincaid, like, good luck. Because I bet you they'd be running the ball 30 times probably.
That's another good point that you just brought up too. Among all the great accolades and numbers that I talked about a few minutes ago, he's also been incredibly reliable and steady and available. And, a lot of receivers get hurt, but that has not been really the case with Stefon. But anyway, I'm going to take a real quick break, come back on the other side, and we're going to talk about some of the things that definitely and legitimately, for good reason too, give us some cause for concern going forward. All right, I am back here on Talking Buffalo with Joe from Queens, and also the baby in the background a little bit. It kind of makes for a natural podcast. I actually kind of like that. Every time I've ever had Chris Baker on, you could hear his dogs just walking all over the place. Anthony Marino ditto too, so it kind of makes it a more legitimate, authentic kind of sounding podcast.
It's verite. We have this TV expression in reality television called verite. It's like a day in the life. It's just kind of like very organic, and that's what it is right now. It's
very organic indeed.
Yeah.
All right, so listen, Stefon Diggs last year specifically, I got some numbers here. Weeks 1 through 10, when Ken Dorsey was the offensive coordinator, he had 100 targets, 73 receptions for 868 yards and 7 touchdowns. Weeks 11 through the playoffs, including the divisional round loss to Kansas City with Joe Brady when he took over, this is a 9-game span. 75 targets, 44 receptions, just 338 yards, and 1 touchdown. His last 13 games, including the playoffs, Stefon Diggs had 0 games where he had 88 yards of receiving or more. In 8 games, 8 of those, I should say, were fewer than 53 yards. His last 11 games, he had 0 games where he had at least 8 catches. And in 5 of his last 13 games, including the playoffs, Josh Allen connected on 50% or fewer of the targets to Stefon. So how much of this production, the dip in production, and I mean, the numbers kind of to some extent speak for themselves here. How much of that do you think is on the scheme? The switch from Dorsey in season maybe to Joe Brady. So how much of it is scheme? How much of it is play calling? And how much of that is, do you just think it's the player wear and tear for, 4 years of getting the ball as much? And maybe he, to some extent, broke down in the second half of the season. What do you think?
I think a lot of it is due to scheme. I really do. And I think it's just at that time, the Bills just went more of a conservative approach with just them running the football more. I think that's a big reason for why it happened. The numbers say so itself in terms of James Cook started going off a little bit more. There's also like snaps too. Like there was the one game, I think it was against New England, where he had the third fewest snaps of any wide receiver for the Bills on that day. Like Gabe Davis, Shakir had more, which I thought was super weird. And I couldn't get over that because I was like, why is this guy getting less snaps? And I think the Bills didn't really give an idea. Some people were like, maybe it's blocking, and Gabe Davis is this amazing down the field blocker and that sort of stuff. I just feel like it just changed a little bit of just how they used them. And they just weren't running gunning it as much as they were before. Like the 2 games I think like the offense, the passing game was really good in was the Eagles and the Dolphins game. That's where I think he did the most.
Mm-hmm. You right?
So.
Got Eric.
Yeah, I was gonna mute and say like I gotta shut the door, but go ahead.
No, so I agree with a lot of what you said. The target share though under Joe Brady was not that different than it was when it was under Ken Dorsey. The difference is, like I said, the receptions and the yards and especially the touchdowns. 7 touchdowns weeks 1 through 10, 1 touchdown for the rest of the season, week 11 through the playoffs. I think to some extent it's on the player. I mean, he was having a couple uncharacteristic drops, especially that one in Kansas City. And I think what concerns me the most about Stefon Diggs is his playoff runs the last 3 seasons, dude. The 3 games that the Bills have been eliminated in, you look at the numbers. In 2021, 6 targets, but he only had 3 receptions for 7 yards. 2022, 10 targets, but he only had 4 catches for 35 yards. And then this past season, he had 8 targets against the Chiefs. He only caught 3 passes for 21 yards. 3 playoff elimination losses combined here. 24 targets, just 10 catches for 63 yards. That bothers me. How much of that do you think is the player? Again, and I'm sorry, Joe, but there are players, and I'm not saying it's necessarily Stefon, but are not just limited to him. There's a lot of good players in sports that seem to play really well in the regular season and kind of fade away in the playoffs. Barry Bonds, for years, was notorious for sucking in the playoffs until he had one great run and he helped the Giants win a World Series. Ditto for A-Rod. He had one magical playoff run with the Yankees. Besides that, A-Rod sucked in the playoffs. I look at Stefon Diggs, and those are terrible numbers. I mean, those are freaking Andy Isabella type numbers that you would expect in playoff elimination losses. So how much of that really concerns you? And then I want to talk about kind of a player comparison, but those numbers suck in the playoffs. That's undeniable.
Yeah, those are really bad. And I think you also have to look at how Josh Allen fared in those games too. The Bengals game, he didn't fare well in.
Well, 2 of the 3, he played great though. I mean, the 2021 game against the Chiefs, and this year, maybe not great,
well, that's the thing.
He certainly played well enough to win.
Well, that's the thing with the Chiefs game. Like it's the 13-second game. Again, how much was it of him being covered?
Sure,
helped out other guys. We never saw Gabe Davis. I mean, he had maybe He had like 2 games that came kind of close to that, I guess. And how much does he else help out? But look, I don't want to be a wimp when I say like, yeah, it's not good for him. You're paid to be a clutch wide receiver in the playoffs. And he's had like I think 2 games off the top of my head that he was pretty good in, like the Colts game he was good in like 2020, and then the Dolphins game last year. But it's far in between. It hasn't been that many, and I don't know why that's the case for the playoffs. The Bills. Josh Allen in the playoffs hasn't been that like he's been kind of up and down. Like the passing game has been up and down. So that's why I'm trying to say like, how is it like? Is it on Diggs or is it on Allen? I don't know in terms of that, but he deserves criticism for that. I mean, you're right in terms of like he has not delivered in the playoffs for the most part.
I would say I'll give him a pass for the 2022 playoffs because Josh Allen was terrible against the Bengals. I mean, he was awful.
Sure.
He was maybe the worst player on the field, and there are a lot of candidates for that game. So I'll give him a pass for that.
The weather wasn't good either.
No, the weather wasn't good. And you could say 2021 didn't matter because Gabe Davis had 200 yards and 4 touchdowns. You could say maybe Steve Spagnuolo went all in on taking away Stefon Diggs that day and let Gabe Davis just run around completely free. But this past year, that Chiefs game, I thought he stunk. I'm just being completely honest. He was not good, and he dropped a bomb. He dropped a bomb in the 4th quarter on the last drive. Then they didn't score a touchdown on that drive ultimately. They moved the ball after, and they could have scored, but they didn't. And if Stefon catches that ball, they take the lead.
Yeah, he was not good in that game. I mean, you can't deny it. I'll say this though. That drop like pissed off a lot of people. Like I just went on, like I think taking for granted Twitter. That pissed off a lot of people. I think it's kind of funny with him. This year we saw Josh Allen miss a lot of deep throws this year. And I don't think any of the anguish, and I get it, like that's a playoff game. This is probably why, but there was way more vigor, like anger and shit like that in that for that drop, way more than any of the Josh Allen overthrows combined, which, again, maybe it was because it was the playoffs, or maybe as you had insinuated before, maybe there's like a target on Diggs in terms of like hurry up, but
maybe media, Joe, maybe the media to some extent, the ones out there that might be a little disenchanted with him, maybe that combined with the lack of production, I don't want to say it turned the fans against him, and I don't want to say it's only because of the media or it's only because of the fans, this and that. Combination of a lot of things. And in complete fairness, Stefon Diggs sometimes doesn't do himself any favors. I know he doesn't have to answer a lot of these questions, and I'm not suggesting that he should, but maybe if he, I don't know, just had a statements a couple differently, or a couple of these cryptic tweets didn't exist and stuff like that, maybe you wouldn't be wondering how much the guy actually does love being in Buffalo. But at the same token, he has said it. I mean, how many times can he say the same
thing? He said it a bunch already. And as I said, I think a lot of it is a little bit of the stirring of the pot, where there are people who have a bit of a, like, they're not fans of his because he doesn't really talk to the media, but he did answer that, and he gets asked that a lot. And maybe it's tough because I do think
like the stuff with his brother talking shit, and he just, I don't know what he said.
You thought he should have. Did you think Diggs should have? Because I remember that. Because I remember Graham got a lot of shit because Graham asked about that.
Yeah,
and then Diggs kind of blew it off like it's not a big deal. And I was kind of in the mindset of like, I don't really care what the brother has to say. But then it's funny. Like 2 weeks ago, I'm watching ESPN. I'm watching ESPN Get Up, and like they were like giant drama in Big D in Dallas. I'm like, oh, what the hell's going on? And it was basically about the players, like siblings, not liking the other players. Like I forgot who it was. Like Dak's mom was dissing Micah Parsons, and then Micah Parsons' brother said some shit, and I was kind of like, who gives a shit what the family has to say about this? And they made it into like it was a 5-alarm fire on ESPN. And I don't want to say you have to take all your P's and Q's from ESPN. You probably shouldn't, because they're desperate. They need programming more than anyone. But I don't know. I think back to the brother stuff, and I was kind of like,
Well, I mean, he did say though, he did in fairness, the brother Diggs from Dallas, he pretty much said he was saying that Stefon wants out of Buffalo.
Well, I
Come
don't
to
think he said he
Dallas, he
wanted.
wants
I
out
don't
of
think he
Buffalo.
wanted out. He just said get him out of
Yeah, get
Buffalo.
him out of Buffalo.
That's
Something like that.
he didn't say I want him out. He wants out.
Right. Right.
And then there was the weird stuff last year with Stephen A. Smith had the thing where he said he wants out.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of people like took a giant dump on Stephen A. Smith, but I'll just say this about that. Like, no one, look, you can think Stephen A. is an asshole. I get that, whatever. But that dude, no one is more powerful in the media in America today than that guy, because he makes a ton of money. So him hearing something, like an agent tells him something, and maybe he didn't flush out the source or like get a second source. He seemed to throw it out there like he did. Then he walked it back a little bit, but it has been a little weird, like in terms of that dynamic between the two. But at the same time, it's like, where's he going to go? Like, he's contracted in. The Bills have all the leverage, and it's like one of those things. As a fan, it's like, why am I wasting my time? Really, like, he's not going anywhere. We're just it's this mental masturbation at this point about it.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, I really don't think the team really much cares either. What his relationship Stefon's is with the media, whether it's good, whether it's awful. At the end of the day, who really gives a shit? And probably to some extent the fans as well, I guess. And we'll talk about the contract here too in a second. But I guess the big question is this: the production falling off and the playoff disappearing acts and elimination games, because that's what they've been statistically. Which I look at a player like Travis Kelce, and this is what I'm talking about, where some players are great regular season stars and they kind of fade away in the playoffs. Conversely, a guy like Travis Kelce this year, all I kept hearing about was how washed up he was. He's done. He's with Taylor. He's distracted. He didn't do shit over the last 7, 8 games. And then the playoffs come. Time to ramp up, because that's what Travis Kelce does. Mm-hmm. Like, that gear seems to be missing in the postseason from Stefon. How much of that is on him versus how much of that is on the offense, the quarterback, the coordinator? That's something we could debate to the end of the earth. But the numbers suck. I guess going into this coming season, because I think we both agree he's not going anywhere this year. How concerned are you right now that what we saw last year in the back half was either an anomaly, just like I said, in-season coordinating changes, just some bad luck? Because you did bring up one more thing here too. You brought up a great point. A couple of Josh Allen airmails on long passes where Stefon Diggs was literally wide open. If those are better throws, Stefon Diggs has another 200, 250 yards and at least probably
the Miami game. Remember the Miami finale? He was wide open by 20 yards and Josh missed him.
He cooked Jalen Ramsey on that play. Yeah. So maybe those stats, again, 1 or 2 completions, better throws from Josh, and maybe we're talking a different story. But how concerned are you right now going into this season? His age, he'll be 31 years old. The wear and tear. Are you concerned that Stefon Diggs is falling off a cliff right now in front of our eyes?
I wouldn't say falling off a cliff. That's a little bit like over the top. It's like Marvin Harrison at his final year where he fell off a cliff. Mm-hmm. I do feel like there is a chance his production does go down because of his age. We all know 30 years up, that's kind of when it starts dwindling down for wide receivers. It's been that way for a while.
Mm-hmm.
It's possible. Like, I don't think it's going to be like fall off a cliff. He's going to have 600 yards receiving and that sort of stuff. But yeah, it could go down a little bit. It's a concern. That's why it's a concern, because he is older. I wouldn't put that, and that's why you have to get more. Going back to what I said last week and the last 25 appearances of me on this podcast, get another wide receiver. That way you have a backup plan in case he starts slipping up. And if you get another wide receiver, you won't believe it, but it's going to free up Diggs more, because then the teams will have to worry about that other wide receiver, whether it's Mike Evans, draft pick number 1, draft pick number 2.
You ain't worried about Trent Sherfield.
Yeah, like, I don't need it. Yeah, no one's worried about Trent freaking Sherfield. No one's worried about, like, getting Gabe Davis, 9 games, 2 catches or fewer. Like,
right.
Come on. But I think it's there. It is there on the surface. Like, yes, you should. But that's what I don't think it's cliff like inducing. Like, oh, it's cliff. I think in another year or 2.
Think he still got juice?
Yeah. I mean, he seems like it's so weird. Like I said, that first 8 games, he was on fire. Then the coordinating change happened. I can't just see he just all of a sudden just hit a wall and like he just went.
Well, he's had 4 straight years. He's had 100 receptions, 4 straight years, at least I think like 1,100 yards. It's tough to really project it right now, but you look at the weapons, you look at the offense, you see what you saw last year. You think he's going to have difficulty getting to, say, 100 receptions for a 5th straight year?
He might, only because I'm curious to see what happens with Dalton Kincaid, because he was really good. He had what, 70 catches, I think he had.
Yeah.
And I think he missed it like a game or two from what I remember. I wish I had the stats in front of me, but he was slow started a little bit. But like, there might be other guys if they go wide receiver first round, which playing the God and football gods, all that. Yes, he could go down a little bit because it's gonna be more guys that it's gonna spread around the field, and then that's when you get into more arguments where people might be like, well, his numbers are, he's obviously declining because his numbers are down where other guys are getting better.
It's feasible that he could have lower numbers but still be equally as productive and dangerous out there and efficient for the Bills, even if it's going to be on fewer catches because of other guys. I know there's some people out there who still wonder about his contract. He's got 4 years left on his deal, including this coming year. He's not seeing all 4 of those years. But a lot of people want the Bills to cut Stefon Diggs right now. And I just want to let people know now, you look at the numbers here on his contract. If you were to cut him today through St. Patrick's Day, $31 million in dead cap space, negative $3 million in savings. So that shit's not happening. March 17th to June 1st, $50 million dead cap hit, negative 21 million savings. So clearly that's not happening. Stefon Diggs is not getting cut or not getting traded from now until June 1st. That's 100% lock. Come June 1st, $8.8 million dead cap this year, $22 million dead cap next year. So $30 million total dead cap, but they would save $19 million against the cap. Kind of sensibly, it's impossible for anything to happen before June 1st, but just for the sake of discussion here, Joe, June 1st, still very unlikely, but that's not impossible. A team eating $30 million over 2 years and saving $19 million on the cap for this year, although that savings would not come until June 1st. If he, for whatever reason, really wants out of Buffalo, and we don't know that right now, but if that's the case, it's possible, ain't it? Or no, not to you.
I don't think it's possible. No, he's staying. He's staying. He's already said it enough. I don't want to no, he's staying. It's
open and shut. It should be open and shut. I agree.
Yeah, he's staying. The only thing I would say is I would not be shocked if they went to him just to be like, hey, will you take a little bit of a pay cut? I don't know why.
We talked about that last week. And that shit ain't happening.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's gonna happen. But I could see them just going, "Hey, buddy, pal, whatever." But I think we'll see. I think it's gonna be fine in terms of up to that. But it's a big year for him. But I really hope they get him help. We always talk about getting Josh Allen help. Get Stefon Diggs help in terms of get him another wide receiver to help a legit one, not freaking Gabe Davis.
Let's talk a couple of, I don't know, maybe Gabe Davis. Well, I think Gabe Davis is still going to be a good player. I don't think it's going to be on the Buffalo Bills. I think his best days still are ahead of him.
But Felicia. Yeah, go ahead.
Potential free agent receivers right now. Free agency starting in about a week and a half, actually. So if we have a conversation 2 weeks from now, he might get some of that help. But anyway, if you want to go big game hunting, which I don't think the Bills financially are going to be in much of a position to do, but I know you're one of those guys who believes the salary cap for the most part doesn't exist, and you can always kick the can down the road. If you're wondering, Mike Evans is a big name out there, and oh my God, would he be a great fit for this organization? Calvin Ridley and Odell Beckham Jr. Those are your 3 high-priced free agents that'll be available. I know T. Higgins and Pittman are 2 guys talked about, but I believe Higgins has already been tagged. I think Pittman's going to get tagged. I don't think they're going anywhere. I just don't see that scenario, dude. But mid-range guys, Tyler Boyd's a name, Hollywood Brown from Arizona, Darnell Mooney from Chicago, and I actually have Gabe Davis as a re-sign among that. But I gotta get a sense that that's something you are not looking to see the Bills do.
No, I'm sorry. I mean, I know. Look, as I said, Gabe Davis. I call Gabe Davis the bill collector, which means he shows up once a month. And that's kind of what he's been. He's a guy who comes in and he's like a stud for one game and then you don't see him for a month. And it happened a lot this season. And look, maybe it was offensive coordinator change. Like, hey, I can't say that about freaking Stefon Diggs and not say it about him. Maybe that was part of like what happened, but it's just.
But he was inconsistent the whole year, regardless of who the coordinator was. Stefon's production was through the roof the first 10, 11 games, and then it fell off.
I think Gabe's a solid. He's an okay player, but just in this day and age, you need to do better. Like you need to have. I think about Dalton Kincaid. Like maybe Dalton Kincaid is going to be great. Like he's had a nice season. Like I said, they probably should have had Dalton Kincaid like 2 years ago. That type, because then it would have helped Gabe Davis. Gabe Davis reminds me a little bit of like, think of like the Sabres from like after Drury and Briere left, and then they said to us like Darcy Regier were like Derek Roy, Tim Connolly, top 20 centers in the league or conference. Whatever he said, and they shoehorned Tim Connolly on like the number 2 line, and they were like, he's a number 2 center. And I remember like, no, he's not. He's like a 3rd, 4th guy. Don't put this pressure on him. And he kind of faltered. He didn't get the job done. He had maybe one good season as like their quote unquote number 2 center. And that's kind of how I feel like Gabe Davis was. He was like the Tim Connolly of like the wide receiving core, which was like, yeah, in his slot when he was like a 3rd, 4th guy, he was great. Like he got, in that Chiefs 13-second game, he was the 3rd option really as a wide receiver. Like if you put like your depth chart, it was Diggs, Cole, and him, and like Emmanuel Sanders, and like they shoved him right back up to like this is going to be your second best wide receiver. Your second best pass catcher. You have to get that. Like I think sometimes it gets conflicted when you go, hey, your number 2 wide receiver should be better, but then if you put number 2 wide receivers against Gabe Davis, it's not that bad. But my issue is he's wanted as the number 2 best pass catcher, which it could be a tight, and that's what he's been. Like they've counted on him to be the number 2 pass catcher. That's including tight ends, that's including running backs.
Sure.
And like over the years, that hasn't been that guy. Like Dawson Knox hasn't been. He's a guy I think needs to get more of shit, to be honest with you. I'm giving a lot of crap to Gabe a little bit, but Dawson Knox was like non-existent this year. Like he was, he didn't do anything. He was he was invisible. He was gone, and like he took like when he came back, he took like 40-50% of the snaps. I saw that, and like I don't know what they're gonna do. That to me is a bigger mystery of like how are they if they're gonna. They seem like they're gonna keep him, but like how are you gonna? I told you this. They have to keep him. Yeah,
his cap. Yeah, he's not going anywhere.
And I told you this last week that I wonder if they're going to do 12 personnel again next year and just walk it back and go, hey, we got new play calls. Joe Brady was watching like the Patriots from 2012 with Gronk and Hernandez. We got their plays, and like what are you going to do? Like you can't have the cap's fake. Sue me. I will walk that back a little bit this year. I may walk it back a little bit, but like, what are you going to do? You're going to have him sit on the bench like for half the time and he's going to sit there and like,
right.
How are you going to do that? Like how, as an organization, I mean, maybe they don't care. Maybe they'll be like, yeah, whatever. But I could see it to where if they try to get him on the field more, you'll get one of those things where people are looking at Dalton Kincaid snap counts and going, why are we lowering Dalton Kincaid snap counts to get Dawson Knox on the field? Because it does feel like to me Kincaid's a better receiver than Dawson Knox. Dawson Knox might be a better blocker and he's a little bit beefier, I guess. But they have those guys there. You got 2 tight ends. Like, how are you going to use it? Are you going to go 3 wide receiver most of the time, and then you're going to interchange those 2 guys? I could see there being a little bit of an issue there with how they're going to manage those 2 tight ends, because that's why I'm saying they might go back to 12 personnel again.
Going back to Stefon, where I arrive at is I don't think he's washed up. I don't think he's fallen off a cliff. I do think he's not the same player that he was in 2020. I think 4 years of, taking a beating and stuff like that, his age, take a little bit of a toll on you. I feel like the Bills are in a position right now where they need to use free agency and the draft to address receiver for 2 different ways. When it comes to free agency, as much as I love Mike Evans and them, we can forget about that. That's just not happening. I look at guys who, like, can you be an upgrade right now over Trent Sherfield? And can you stretch the field some? Because I think that's the one thing the Bills were lacking last year, besides Gabe Davis, and just didn't do it enough. But a guy who's going to stretch the field and get down the field. And I look at a handful of realistic targets. These are guys that I think the Bills could be able to afford. Noah Brown from Houston is definitely one of them. I like him a lot. Josh Reynolds from Detroit is another guy. KJ Osborne from Minnesota. And Nick Westbrook Kenny from Tennessee. Kind of a Gabe Davis clone. Big guy, good run blocker, stretch the field, not the greatest route runner. But those are your maybe day one wide receiver two. And ultimately, hopefully, like that, you hope that they're going to be an Emmanuel Sanders type or better. All right. But to me, it's all about the draft. This has got to be the year. And I'm with you on this one. And I usually am not necessarily first round wide receiver because I feel like it's a deeper position. But this is the year, man. You got to go out and get a guy in the first round. A, he'll help you right away. B, I mean, the Bills started two rookies last year, Kincaid and Torrance, and they played well. So you're going to get a rookie. You can start him right away, or he's going to certainly play right away. That's your right now motive. Going forward, this could be a potential replacement for Stefon. If he's not falling off a cliff this year, we might have this conversation a year from now where he does fall off the cliff, or he might get cut or traded at that point because the Bills can get out from that contract for a lot of money. You get a 5-year guy at a rookie cost. I know you're not a draft guy, so to speak, too much right now.
I'm a draft guy when it's like 2 weeks and like out.
Right.
Yeah,
so I know you don't know.
But...
I know you don't know a lot of the names, but I can tell you, man, Brian Thomas Jr. from LSU, 6'3", 209. He ran a 4.34 this weekend. Potential top 20 pick at this point now. And then that Xavier Worthy kid from Texas. I don't know if you heard about him, but 4.21 40. He set the all-time record for the combine. He's 6'1", but he's only 172 pounds. Almost kind of like a Roscoe Parrish type. But the comparison I'm reading a lot of is by putting on 5-10 more pounds, this guy could be another Tyreek Hill. And I'm like, wow, that's what the Bills are missing more than anything else, Joe. I go back to the Chiefs when they had Hill. Do you remember the Bills, Leslie Frazier, that defense? We would be scared shitless. Teams were scared shitless of trying to defend Tyreek Hill.
Sure.
The Bills, that's what they need, man. You got Kincaid and Cook, Diggs, good route runners, good pass catchers, but nobody scares the shit out of you on this offense. That's what they need. Xavier Worthy, that's my guy right now.
All right. Well, I mean, if he's...
Even if you don't know about the player, but just that type of player, that's what they need, right?
Sure. Yes, big play sounds great. I don't want to get pigeonholed with a wide receiver in terms of like, how is he going to fit this offense? I don't care if he can play the slot. I want the best all-purpose wide receiver.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care if I don't want to hear about like, oh, they can't draft this guy because he plays in the slot and then they already have Shakir. No, like you need the best wide receiver. I don't care where he can play on the field. Like you get him on the field. Like if that guy is Tyreek Hill, possibly if he gains a little more, fine, yeah, take him. A deep threat would be great. You know, I think they need a lot of that. They needed a little bit of a deep threat. They could definitely use a guy who gets a lot of yak yards. Sure, like I am not about to fall in love with Shakir yet. In terms of like, I think he's had a nice month, but like I'm not even really counting on him, in my opinion. Really? Now I say that in a, yeah, he's fine. Like, okay, if you want him to be the slot guy, fine. But I'm not like, again, get more guys into that fold. Like, get more options. You know, get a first and second rounder. Like, they're dying, man. Like, if you're gonna go 3-4 wide receiver sets, they're dying. Like, get other guys. Like, with Shakir, don't make the same mistake you made with Gabe Davis, where you took like, oh, he had this really great finish to the season. That's our number 2 guy, number 2 pass catcher. Don't do that with Shakir. Okay, like he can play, but you can still get another guy in there, like that does what he does, or other guys. I'll say this about the rookie thing, like as you mentioned, Cyrus and Kincaid playing last year. I don't know if that's a slam dunk for this next draft class. There are guys who haven't played their rookie years. You know, James Cook hardly played his rookie year. And I was like, hey, why is he not playing at times? I guess you could say because they had Singletary already, and then they had Zach Moss, and then Hines, you know, Naheem Hines came in, and you know, Elam like didn't play at all. Like we're still on that, like, you know, on that whole, like, is he gonna play ever for us? So I wouldn't count on whoever they draft playing automatically. Like, you don't know. It's case by case. There's evidence that they sit guys and there's evidence that they don't sit guys. So I don't know. I would like to, like, as you said, I would like to think that they're going to have the guy play. It depends what they do in free agency. If they get like a veteran, like out there, like who knows, like a guy, like a fringe guy who's like, oh, yeah, he had a 700-yard season, we'll say. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like John Brown kind of guy, like a guy they're going to play,
Yep.
Modest sums. Then yeah, I could see them being like, yeah, we'll slow this guy coming in here. Like they've done that before in the past. If they don't do Dick in free agency and they go in with Shakir and Diggs and like they sign a Sherfield guy again or something like that, then yeah, I could see the guy wide receiver starting right away. Like they would have no choice. But you never know. Like they are a mixed bag there. Like there are guys, like I can't even remember. There were so many guys over the years who I remember when they were say like who the healthy scratches were, they'd be rookies, and we'd be like, why is this guy not playing? And like first round rookies, second round guys. AJ Epinesa didn't play that much his rookie year. He was a healthy scratch a bunch. And again, he kind of worked out. He had a good year, but like you have no freaking idea like how they're going to be with these guys. And so I don't want to automatically say like he's going to play right away. He should. Like, yeah, I think first rounders should play right away, but I'm not McDermott. And he does have a tendency. It's you can lay it on. They could go through all those draft picks between like rounds, and it's really rounds 1 through 2, like 1 to 3, maybe definitely 1 and 2. But there are guys who just didn't really play right away, and some got in the field and they did their thing, and others we haven't really heard from at all. So I want as many. I like when it comes to freaking going to a buffet, I want as many dishes as possible at wide receiver. Like I'm all in on that. And I think what you're going to see a lot of, and my last point on this is you're going to see a lot, and I've already seen it on social media where, the Bills, whatever the Bills can't do, they can't reach for a wide receiver. Like if they're at 28 and there's a wide receiver who's ranked 38th on their draft board, but there's the defensive tackle's 29th and he's there, like they got to go for the defensive tackle. Like, first off, we don't know what their draft board looks like. Secondly, how big of a difference is there between like the 29th slotted guy and your 38th slotted guy? Is it that big of a difference, or are we just talking like they're like this? Yeah. It sounds, and then I think we're going to get a lot of that leading into the draft. I already have seen content guys planting those roots so they can piss off the wide receiver train that I'm on, with wanting to be like, oh, they should go defensive tackle, or what if this happens? Like these case scenarios where like Matt Miller, or I think it's Matt Miller, the guy, the NFL draft guy. Did you see the clip that Beauvais put where he was basically like, they need to get a wide receiver in this first round because there's so much. I read it as like they need to get a wide receiver in that round because there's so much talent there that will be there. And a lot of people, not a lot, but there are a few content bros who were just like, like, I just explained it, like you go by the board, and if there's a guy at 20, if your wide receiver there is ranked 39th on your board, you don't take a wide receiver because the defensive end is right there at who's your slotted as your 30th. And I get that to a certain extent, but my God, like they need a wide receiver desperately, people, like desperately, like my God, they need it. Like, I know there's free agency, but holy crap, like get it. Okay. It's not a giant reach. Okay. Between those two slots. And it's not like, and then you're not going to know at the end of the day what their board looks like. They're not going to come on and be like, oh yeah, we've got the wide receiver because we needed to reach for him instead of the defensive lineman. They're not going to tell you shit.
I would say this. When it comes to receivers, I agree about adding. I don't agree with you about Khalil Shakir. I do think Khalil Shakir's got some star potential there. I really like what I saw from him. That's not going to make me say I'm not interested in a guy who's primarily a slot guy because Khalil Shakir is already there. That's not what I'm saying. I look at these receivers and what they need, and without using specific names, I would say this. Free agency, the goal should be find a player on the level that somewhere between Emmanuel Sanders when the Bills signed him and maybe with the ceiling of what John Brown was when they signed him. Realistically, on the free agent front, okay? On the draft front, I'm adamant as well that they got to take a receiver in the first round, with the goal being you want that guy to be what you hoped Gabe Davis was going to be. Ultimately, wasn't with any consistency. But if you give me a and Emmanuel Sanders, a guy who's maybe your fourth receiver in free agency, but he could be your two when you need him to be. You know, if Diggs goes down, rookies gets off to a slow start, he can hold down the fort. But the rookie class is where you got to go get the next star. You know what I mean? Like you're going to sign a free agent receiver. I don't think he's going to be a quote unquote star. Whereas the rookie class, and I wanted to throw one other name out there specifically. His name's Adonal Mitchell from Texas, 6'3", 209, ran a 4.35. Dude's a beast. There's going to be a minimum of 6 first rounders on wide receivers, at least. Maybe 7, maybe even 8, but there's going to be at least 6.
I think the big thing you have to ask is, do they trade down or trade up?
No.
Excuse me. You don't want them to use draft picks to go get a wide receiver earlier.
No. You said trade down. I'm not.
I'm sorry.
I'm for trading up. If the Bills are at 28 and say Mitchell or Brian Thomas Jr., one of those guys are there and they really like them and they want to go from 20 to say 23, 24 to make sure you go get them.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
I am all for trading up.
Sure.
I'm not trading 10, 11 spots because I think this position is really deep. So I'm not going to give up like a second round pick or a first next year or anything like that. But I am all for going from 28 to 23, 24, 25 if it's going to mean getting a Thomas or a Mitchell or Xavier Worthy, somebody like that. They got to get their receiver.
How much do you really trust this draft, though, at wide receiver? Like, it feels like every other year, it's like, this is a deep wide receiver class. This is this class. And I'm always caught because people forget. Like, I was thinking about like 2 years ago, it was supposed to be a really deep quarterback class. 5 quarterbacks picked within the first 15 picks. And it was Trevor Lawrence. It was Zach Wilson. It was Lance. It was Mac Jones. And then, the fifth one I'm escaping. It might have been like a not great guy. And it's not like a great,
I agree.
Great, you know, but like they said in like that year.
Class, though. This feels like
I hope you're right.
Class.
I wish.
It's a great year to need a receiver. This is a great year to need a receiver in the draft one. It seems like a really deep class. Guys are putting up big numbers, workout numbers, guys who look good on film. Alea McConkey from Georgia is another guy too. I'm telling you, there's 7, 8 guys.
I'm going to write this down and like, I'm going to put this in, like, I'm going to write this and put it in like a safe where I'm going to say this was the year that the wide receiver draft is super deep. And 2-3 years from now, I'm going to open up that safe and I'm going to be like, okay, let's check these guys. Were the draft experts really right? And look, hey, I remember the Sammy Watkins draft class. That was a big wide receiver. Like that was Mike Evans, Landry was there, a couple other guys, and they did okay. Eric Ebron was in there too, and he wasn't very good, unfortunately. He was mediocre. Right. But hey, look, if this is the class to get it, then great. I'm all for it. I will say this, like, yeah, I don't know if I want like a super veteran for wide receiver. If you're asking me, that's probably the cheap way to get it, like in terms of money. I would like to get a guy like under 30, maybe you mentioned Hollywood Brown, and that's a guy who he's been very inconsistent. I know because I've had him on my fantasy team. You know, I don't know how much he's going to cost, you know, but that would be like a guy that's like, he's young still, and maybe he takes the next step in his next contract.
He won't be cheap.
Yeah, he probably won't be. Or yeah, a lot of guys. Maybe you're right in terms of getting.
It can be doable though. I mean, look, I think the Bills they need receiver help.
I am for them going defensive line, and if the beef bros want the beef up front, get it in free agency.
Oh, okay, all right.
The beef guys, fat
beef guys. I know what you mean.
Beef, yeah. If the football guy wants, yeah, whatever. I'm just trying to be cute. Get them in free agency, because I said this last week that I think defensive line, when you draft them, it takes a little bit longer for them to develop. I still think they do have some youth there still, you know, with Rousseau and Ed Oliver. Like, you have a young, like 1-2 punch who are still in their prime. You can get like a veteran, like get a veteran. Sure. You don't need to get younger there. You have an heir apparent, like you have the Randy Orton and Triple H, like from Evolution.
Always a wrestling.
Yeah, you got those two there where you have like a young, you got some young studs on each side of the ball, you know, or on the defense. And linebacker, you have Bernard. You have Bernard as the heir apparent to Milano, and then you have like the secondary. You have some young guys with the veteran people. Sure. Blah blah blah. Like you don't. Like, yeah, you don't need more youth there, really. You get a veteran defensive tackle, throw him in there, get a fat guy, call it a day, and then wide receiver. You need youth at wide receiver.
Whatever leads to the Bills taking a receiver at number 28 or higher, I'm all for it. To conclude the Bills stuff here, I'll say this. Usually I start doing mock drafts and then I do 6 weeks of mock draft shows. And then a couple days before I lock in, I'm like, a couple days before the draft, I'm like, I'm locked in on this player. I can tell you right now, March 2nd, March 3rd, whatever the hell day it is, I'm locked in on the Bills taking a receiver. And I'm locked in on it either being Brian Thomas Jr. or Adonai Mitchell. And I'll hear cases for Xavier Worthy. Those are my 3 guys. I want them right now. I don't need to wait any more mock drafts and processes. I don't know. Good conversation about Diggs too. Like I said, I think we both arrived that his best days might be behind him, but I don't think he's completely out of juice either. But the Bills need help, and hopefully we'll find out starting in a week or so if they're going to go out and get that with veterans at least. Anyway, before we get out of here quickly, the Buffalo Sabres. I want to turn my attention to them for a minute. They're playing right now, by the way. So Joe and I are taping this on Sunday, and so I can't speak on tonight's game. But coming into this game on Sunday night, the Sabres have been on a heater. They've won 5 of their last 6, 7 of their last 9, but they're still 10 points back in the wild card with 20 games left. So they're donezo. The postseason is done.
Hey, what were the Bill? Hold on. What were the Bills' percentage? Like the lowest when they were 6-6 for them?
It was 15%. It was 15% on the New York Times. That was the lowest. The Sabres are at 1%. Just put that out there. The Sabres are at 1%. They're done. They're done.
I thought it went up a little bit. I could have sworn I saw it go up. But
maybe a couple points, but they're done. Okay. So anyway, they've won 5 of their last 6 going into this game on Sunday night. Does this hot streak give you more optimism about the team? And I know you follow them, but you don't follow them with the same vigor that you do the Buffalo Bills, of course. But I know you at least have your eyes on them and you watch from time to time. Does this hot streak give you more optimism? Like, yeah, this is a good team. Or does it just make you angrier that they kind of fell into this hole where it's the beginning of March and we're talking about the season being over already? Does it just make you angrier that you finally see them playing like this?
I wouldn't, as I said, like last week, because of my like having a baby and like I haven't been able to watch as much. So I can't say like they've angered me that much. So I'm probably the wrong person, but I will say that there is some optimism. Because look, all season long, it feels like from what I've watched, like the power play was terrible. That's kind of held them down.
Mm-hmm.
The majority of their scorers have not hockey's weird. Sometimes you get hot one year. Like I can't explain it, how Drew Stafford once scored 34 goals and then the next year he can't even get to the 20 for the rest of his career. It just happens sometimes in hockey. The thing that you can say, like if they can, for next year, and yes, I'm looking for next year, if they can combine the scoring from last year with the goaltending from this year, they're a playoff team easily. You know what I mean? And that's kind of where you have to look at it, where UPL's been pretty good. And that's one thing I'll say, like, I was definitely in that whole, I wasn't in that, like, get rid of UPL guy last year. A lot of people I felt were, and I was kind of like with the sense of like, he's a young guy. Like goaltenders take time to develop. Like, at least from what I've seen, like even the Sabres pipeline, Ryan Miller, Marty Braun, took them a while to like get their feel. So he's been great this year. Like I said, but he's been good. He's been much better than he was last year, where we were like, dump this guy, throw him into Lake Erie. So I don't say like angrily, like if I say I'm angry about it, that's fake. Like yesterday I watched like a period and a half, and I saw the third period where they scored 1 billion goals, which against Vegas. And that was
Vegas,
awesome.
Yeah.
There were some nice, pretty goals there.
You're not wrong about. I don't think you're wrong about them scoring more like last year and playing better, or not even better defensively, but just
the goaltending better. Yeah, they just need to get the scoring back. What they did last year.
But you're not. And again, I suppose it all goes hand in hand. But to me, the biggest thing, if this team wants to be a playoff team, to me, it's even more simple than that, or at least simple in theory, and that's they got to freaking play better at home, dude. They stink at home. They've stunk at home the last couple of years. They're 14 going into this game again Sunday night, which they're up. By the way, the Sabres are up right now in the second period as we're recording this, but they're 14, 16 and 1 at home this year. So they got a losing record at home. Last year, when they fell 2 points short of the playoffs, they were 3 games under 500 at home. They're not good at home. Low energy in the building. The building is often dead. But for good reason.
It was lively the other night.
We saw lately. Yeah. But my point is, this is a team that needs to learn how to play better at home. And I know they're young and they got distractions off the ice and yada yada yada. We talked about that last week. But if this is going to be a playoff team, they got to win at home. They got to perform better at home. And I guess the last question is, do you look at this team right now? Are they good enough to just kind of ride this process out, or come off season? You say, why are they not playing better at home? Why do we get off so many slow starts? Why do we go 2-9 between November 11th through December 5th, which kind of put them out of it? And do we change the head coach, or do I still have confidence in Don Granato? And let's see what he could do next year. Which, by the way, he's got an extension that hasn't even kicked in yet. But do
Yeah,
you
he's
do
not. I
they
mean,
getting rid of him?
he's not going to get. They're not getting rid of him. I
No,
don't
you don't
think
think
they
so?
are. No, I think Terry. I think Terry views the hockey. He's done firing people unless they really mess up. But I think some of it is economics. I think some of it is also the past where they fired a lot of people, even though they should have fired them. But I feel like they're going to wait it out a little bit unless they completely collapse down the stretch and go into hell. They have a plan. Like I just saw like this week they had like the number one prospects of the freaking NHL.
That's every year with this team, though. But yes,
you're right. But I think what they feel like, oh, we have these young guys going to come up and they'll take over slots and that sort of stuff. You know, I if anything, if there's any frustration I can understand is like, you know, Kevin Adams just hasn't traded anyone. Like it's been the same roster, like, you know, since Jack Eichel left. You know what I mean? He hasn't really done much. He adds like he tinkle, like, you know, Johnson has been terrible. They're the blue line guy, like, you know, from what I've watched and read about it. So I don't know what they're going to do in the offseason. I think they're going to run it back, and they might just say like injuries were an issue with Tage going down. Maybe they're going to say those lines, but I don't think they're going to fire I don't think they're going to fire people. I really don't. I think, you know, I think they really like their core and they like what they got here with these guys. And, you know, the whole thing with at home, like I have no idea why they're terrible at home. I don't know. It's been that way for a while.
because there's not enough energy. There's not enough energy in that building because they're getting off the shitty starts, which goes back to me to coaching.
I don't know.
Goes back to coaching.
I don't know about the energy in the building. I mean,
I've heard from many people who cover the team, and it's not sources because they say it publicly all the time. Sure. Guys like Harrington and Jurgen and them, they talk about the energy being really low in the building because they're not playing well.
The players got to be better. I mean, my God, the Josh Allen's best year happened when there was no fans in the building.
Yeah,
like what you're going to tell me? Like, oh, like give them something to cheer for. But I don't know. Go back to white home uniforms like they used to do back in our childhood. Like I don't know. Try that sort of stuff.
I think they're going to run it back too. Maybe they get another defenseman or something like that, something small, nothing big. But it comes down to, is Granato the coach to get this team to play 8 to 10 points better at home over the course of a season? Because if he is, then you keep him. If he's not, then you got to find a coach who can get these young guys more discipline or whatever it takes for them to play better at home. They're a different team at home than they are on the road.
It's obvious the locker room really likes this guy based on Harrington's report. And I mean, Terry Pagula likes anyone, I feel like, if you are nice.
Got Harrington on the by the way, cheap plug here. I got Mike Harrington coming on the show on Wednesday. So I'm looking forward to.
Can I come on? I want to talk to Mike. I want to ask Mike, why does he hate Chad Dominicus so much? Why is he always trolling him and like yelling about him every time on Twitter? And why did he block him? If you want to ask him from me, Joe from Queens, you know him, wants to know, why did you block Chad Dominicus? Like, please ask him. Ask him from me. Just like, look, Joe wants to know, blame him. He's an ass, you know, that sort of thing.
All right.
Can I just say one real quick thing? And this has nothing to do with this. So this book, if you're watching the video, it's Bills 101. Okay. Mm-hmm. It is a like guide that you would read to your baby about how the football works. Like 10 players on the field, 11 players on the field, et cetera, et cetera. So at the end of this book, and I realized this the other day, it goes over the championship bills, okay? It goes the 64 AFL championship, the 90 AFC championship, the 91 AFC championship, and the 93 AFC championship. It says championship games at the top. We're missing 92 championship AFC. Really? Why? I don't know why. I've discovered this, and I don't know who Mickelson Entertainment is. It was copyrighted in 2021, but I don't know why we're missing a championship in here. The Miami one. So if you're out there, it's my first team board book. If you're the author, I'd like someone to message me because I'm going to have to read this to my son and go, oh, let me make a buffalo symbol for 92 and when they squish the fish because it's not in this book. And I don't know why. So anyway, sorry. Go ahead.
All right. Well, hey, we're gonna end. We'll end the show there with some controversy. I want to get out of here because I want to get this episode up and done. Plus, I want to watch Sting's final AEW match.
Oh, geez.
Well, maybe next week we'll talk about that. We'll get into some wrestling talk because WrestleMania is around the corner. A lot of good things going on with the Bloodline, Cody Rhodes, all that stuff. We'll say
you bought a $55 hoodie of Roman Reigns, for God's sake. So you're back.
I'm gonna wear it soon, man. So
you're back in, yeah.
All right. Make sure you follow Joe on Twitter at Buffalo Wins, and I will be back with a brand new episode tomorrow. I'll talk to you then.
Cheers.